I want to say thank you for joining in. Thank you for joining with me, Mr. Murica, the Bearded Truth, Jason Lyon. Been a wild and wonky week, of course. Never amiss when it comes to Republicans being in power, of having a big blowout of emotions, of animosity, of partisanship, and everything else. Thank you for the super hearts. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining in, and for the invite and your followers as well. So, of course, big news this week. What is the big news? The plan from the Republicans is not going in accordance with the way that they wanted it to. Originally, if we go way back to when Kennedy was actually stepping down, one of the things that was being discussed was, hey, we're going to use the next nomination. We're going to use the next nomination process to appoint somebody. We're going to have this happen right at the end of the regular season, if you will, just before we get into the postseason, that is the midterms. So they wanted to be able to use this and be able to know that the Democrats were going to stand up and object and find ways of fighting this. Welcome in, Shane. Step up and find ways of obstructing, of delaying it, of causing problems. So they wanted to use it in order to look good for the voters, to energize the Republican base. And now what we are seeing, because of these allegations that were being pushed against Brett Kavanaugh, we're seeing it's not quite working out in the way that they wanted to. And of course, we have a couple rogue Republicans, if you will, that are throwing their own monkey wrench into the mix. So this entire situation, we see a lot of people on both sides, Republicans and Democrats right now, that are just outraged with the way things are going. And so I want to try to pull everybody back, pull away from your party a little bit, and let's look at this and let's try to be objective. We can see that there's plenty of Republican senators that were actually being honest with what they were saying, and there's also Democratic senators being honest with what they were saying, but because they were within their party, they were omitting information, and so that omission of information is why this is such a partisan view, and this is why it's so unbecoming. Right? People that are on the left, people that are on the right are looking at this situation in absolute disgust. They're looking at how disgusting our Senate, our United States federal Senate, is acting over these accusations. I grabbed Shane Sweeney's butt, and he doesn't remember much. Good thing he didn't remember much, because I drugged him. I'm just kidding, of course. I don't have a hand-free mic. I need to get a hands-free mic. Right now, we're running off the iPad. So I want to get into a little bit of the testimonies. The testimonies, one big fundamental issue that I saw from a lot of people that were speculating, that were discussing about what happened during those testimonies, was they listened to only the side that they wanted to listen to. When it was the opposite side, so if you went in with with the view that Kavanaugh himself, hold on one second, please.
I got it. I'm getting the door.
All right, sorry about that. So if you went in to the Kavanaugh hearings, to this confirmation process, and you thought Kavanaugh was the man, he was the man, he needed to come in, he has strong constitutional prowess, if you will, and he needed to be the man to come in and to save the day, essentially. Then when you listen to this, when you listen to the hearings, right, you're listening for things that we're going to build up on that bias. If you thought that Christine Blasey Ford was the woman that was actually being honest and truthful about her allegations, then that is what you would collect from that as well. So your confirmation bias is something that we all struggle with, whether you want to acknowledge your struggle or not. If you want to be honest with this, right, you have to understand that you have to look at both sides. You have to actually look at both sides. You can't just watch it and go, man, it's all fake. She's all just a liar. Because listening to Mrs. Ford's or Dr. Ford's testimony, She came first, of course, because she was the accuser. Her testimony was filled with emotion. It was filled with true anguish, with true pain that had happened to her. Of course, the question is was this Brett Kavanaugh? Was this the situation which you speculated on? Because none of the facts corroborate this. But I think it's undeniable at this point to say that she was not in any way victimless her entire life. Right? It's clear that something has happened to her. Now, whether if that's 30 years later when she finally spoke about it to somebody, did she get the name right? Does she have the correct memory of this? Was this manipulated over time? Because it was 30 years later, right? It was in 82 when this alleged attack happened. And it wasn't until 2012 until she spoke about it. So 3 decades, longer than I've been alive. This woman has kept it in, and obviously, if it happened then, whenever it happened, however it happened, she's felt anguish from that. But has she manipulated this? That's a big question that we will never be able to understand. We will never be able to actually get the truth from, right? You can't actually get into somebody's brain to understand them, and I'm glad that we're not able to. Why have we allowed this country to get to the point where the circus passes for legitimate politics? Because the general populace doesn't understand the normal. Oh, hey, Brady. Because the normal populace, the average citizen, doesn't understand the normal process. So whenever something out there happens like this, it creates a precedent. And then as long as you stay within that realm or you get a little more circusy, people are like, man, it's just politics is normal. It's just hitting back, guys. You know, there's a level of uneducatedness that is very prevalent across this country. I appreciate you joining in, man. And so looking at her testimony, I think that she had a lot of truth in there. I think she had a lot of pain in there, but there were a lot of questions that needed to be answered. There were a lot of issues there that wouldn't be solved. And if I could take Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut, if I can take what he was saying to Judge Kavanaugh, a little lie means your entire thing's a lie, right? And if we take that and we go and we apply that to some of Dr. Ford's testimony, by his standards, which I think is a disgusting standard on its own, but by his standards, her entire testimony is invalid. It's all a lie then. So she just perjured herself. A couple instances in which that occurred would be when she was asked, hey, why did it, did I lose you guys? Oh no. Are you guys there? All right. Sorry about that, Periscope. One thing that happened and the way that this occurred was when the prosecutor, the woman who has worked with sexual harassment, sexual assault, sexual aggression cases, asked her, hey, you say you don't like flying. Why is in your past this, and this? So it can't be construed as an honest application if you're consistently flying, if that's something that you enjoy. You enjoy flying to go to a destination and then say, I'm terrified of flying. I don't like it. I can't do it. If that's part of your justification as to why you had to wait an extra week in order to come, Stefan, welcome in. If you had to wait a week in order to build up the courage, how long does it take whenever you are willfully setting it up, right? When you're setting it up for your own vacation, I think that there's a little bit of dishonesty within that answer, which just by Senator Blumenthal blows it all out of proportion all on its own. There's a couple. If we look at the rhetoric of the Republicans, if we look at the rhetoric of the Democrats during this, we can see that between the two stances, they change wildly. If we look at the Democrats during Ford's case, what was she asking? What were they asking? They weren't asking anything. Sorry about that. They don't ask anything. What do? They come in there and they say, look, you're a hero. You're courageous. You are brave. You are strong. We love you. Thank you. There are thousands of women and men around the country that support you. But they didn't want to use the hearing for what it was, and that was to be a fact-finding, right? This was part of the investigation. This was them trying to collect more information in order to make a well-educated decision. So the Democrats folded on it. They opted out of it. They didn't want to ask questions. They basically asked things that were within the statement that build up the support. Look, you have friends that you say that were there. You have corroborating witnesses, despite the fact that they weren't. You have people that supported you. Now, I want to get into the supporting you thing. People were saying, I believe her. I believe her. And they were using this as pieces of evidence, right? Other people believe her, and so we should too, was the justification behind that. That's the line of reasoning whenever somebody says, well, this guy believes you, so why don't you? Right? If somebody who knows her in some capacity believes her story without evidence being provided, why are you not willing to take the same leap of faith? So Democrats failed on that side. Republicans did something that I think was, in essence, it was to try to stay away from the stigma of men going after a woman. Yeah, and I want to go back to the prosecutor when I finished with it. Yes, absolutely. When Republicans, they had the prosecutor, and the prosecutor was taking up all of their time. They were giving it away. And by them giving away their time and allocating it to this prosecutor, she was getting little 5-minute segments to be able to ask all the questions that she could. And so welcome in PMS, and because she wasn't able to run a dialogue for a long enough time, if she started building up support or building up emotions, building up momentum, if you will, it was time to turn back to the Democrats. Hit her with the soft questions, build up her confidence and everything else. So there's nothing there. And so it was a plan to keep away from having the men going after a woman who was an alleged victim. And it was a way to have a woman question another woman. Yes, I agree with you, MBK. Somebody lied under oath. That is the big question. Tigress, welcome. And so looking at that whole debacle, looking at the Republicans' debacle, was it effective? I don't think it was effective. I don't think that it got them the results that they wanted. I don't think it's going to, it was enough to sway the people's vote. It did, however, provide a couple key pieces of information. One of the last things, well, actually the very last question from the prosecutor from Arizona, I think her last name was Michelle. And we'll once I finish breaking down everything, we will get into what it means for Kavanaugh. Absolutely. The prosecutor, her last question was, hey, basically, you got misled by your representatives, by your lawyers. You got misled by your representatives. You needed to, instead of taking a polygraph test, which is not admissible in court, despite what the senators wanted to utilize it as, what it was you need to go through this fact-finding process in which people actually have their memories more refined and clearer and more vivid, to where they can actually find out if in fact it's true, if in fact it's not the right person, and it would provide more answers. So she threw that in last question, and I think that was a very important question that nobody wants to talk about, because when we find a more effective way of getting this information, that's something that the lawyer should have been pushing on, and it's important. It's important that we see those things and we say, all right, hopefully then she can find her justice. If she goes through that process and it solidifies and it provides her with some pieces of evidence that Brett Kavanaugh was the aggressor in the situation, then she can provide that, and she could possibly go after it. Now there's a monkey wrench even in that plan now. But so we have that. And then, or she finds out that it was somebody else. That would be the better way. That would be the better way. She goes and she goes through the process and she finds out, hey, my memory didn't serve me well. It was wrong. It's this person. It's this person. I feel confident. And then they go after them. And then at least the witch hunt is over. Okay? That would be best case scenario. If we go back to the first one and she finds out, hey, it was Kavanaugh, here's the evidence for it, but the FBI already conducts its investigation and closes it, guess what? Double jeopardy, right? You technically can't go on trial second time. They may be able to if they don't go to trial, if they don't push anything, then they could reopen that. That would definitely be the logical way. Exactly, 36 years ago. There's no way of proving that. So when it came to the rhetoric, the demeanor of Dr. Ford, she was distraught. She was emotional. She was frail. She didn't exude herself as a powerful person. She exuded herself as an intelligent woman, but not as a power-seeking person. I think that demeanor is very important because it showed that she was vulnerable in essence. And so I think that that's important. Now I want to go to the Brett Kavanaugh part of his testimony. What I expected and what we received were very close. I expected him to come out guns ablaze. I expected him to come out and just shoot down each and every person that he could. And that is basically what he had done. He came out and he said, this is a farce, this is a lie, these allegations are all ridiculous and lies. I have a book and this is my diary, this is my calendar. It was forward and backwards, which means if I didn't go to if I planned an event, I would sign it in there. If I didn't go to an event, I would cross it off. And this is how I kept track of my days. I started doing this in 1980. My father started doing it in 1978. Temperament. I was going to get there. So he came out guns ablaze. He brought evidence. He brought facts. He came out and he said, look, the four others that she had named all denied the allegations. This is actually is a part untruth. They denied recalling a situation. They didn't deny the existence of it. Denied recalling it. Marine Mom, welcome in. And so there is a distinction between those two. Let's be clear. Yeah, exactly. Kavanaugh was well within any logical reasoning to act in that way. Yeah. So Kavanaugh came out there and we can see the flip in the rhetoric between senators and Republicans. Republicans were now asking their own questions, were actually getting involved. And what they were doing was they were standing there and they were essentially grandstanding and saying, it's all the Democrats just trying to push their parties, just trying to push their narrative, just trying to take down a good man, trying to take down Brett Kavanaugh. And they didn't really want to push into any way when it came to Brett Kavanaugh. Basically the same thing as what the Democrats had just done for Ford. Now, did the Democrats follow with what the Republicans did? No, of course not. What they did was they went on the aggressive. They went on the aggressive the same. Well, worse, right? Republicans used a prosecutor in order to ask very specific questions. Democrats went off and they went full-blown hysterical, ridiculous, as they normally do. We saw people like so of course everybody wants to talk about the Lindsey Graham. So Lindsey Graham comes out, and Lindsey Graham, for those of you who don't know, he is one of my state senators here in South Carolina, against my wishes. But he railed against the Democrats. He railed against the Democrats and said, look, this is your guys' fault. You guys are tearing a good man's name away from him, dragging it through the mud. And you guys are disgusting. This is unbecoming of you. This is unbecoming of everything. You guys are disgusting, vile people. And it really, if you're a conservative, if you're a Republican, if you're somebody who doesn't like the actions of what the Democrats did, this is something that you are cheering. Don't fall in love with the man. Please do not fall in love with the man. The man is a terrible, terrible senator. He is a huge war hawk. He was part of the National Defense Authorization Act. He was a part of the Patriot Act. It's disgusting. But he does his thing, and he comes off on fire, and he feels scorned. Doesn't really ask Brett Kavanaugh anything. The only thing that I think that he asked him was, basically the only question. It was a bunch of simple questions that were already answered within his testimony. And then, are you a gang rapist? And he says no, and then he moves on. What happens after that is Senator Whitehouse. Senator Whitehouse decides that he's going to go into Brett Kavanaugh's yearbook and go after one of his friends who they called her alumni, and the disparaging narrative of what Democrats are saying versus what Brett Kavanaugh is saying. There's obvious differences between those two. Probably the best part about it was whenever he says, "What does bird mean?" And he's like, "That's flatulence. I was 16 years old." And he's like, "So I would expect that it was the same thing when Mark Judge wrote it." And he's like, he wrote it, not me. Like, really, are we staying on my yearbook? Like, this is stupid. But I think that's a lot of people wanted to look at the temperament. They wanted to look at the temperament of Brett Kavanaugh during this and say, this is not somebody that we want as a Supreme Court justice. So what had happened? The clear, quick overview. Brett Kavanaugh lives a long life. He's 53 years old. He's had a clear record. He's had FBI investigations. He's been involved in the public view for a long time. He went through some controversy back in 2003 until 2006 when he was nominated because he was looked at by Democrats as being too conservative to be a judge. He finally gets through. He gets it. He gets nominated to be the Supreme Court justice. He's going through. He passes his hearing. He's on his way to being accepted. And then via Dianne Feinstein or via whatever methodology it is, now there's allegations against him, and that people are sending him death threats, sending his family death threats. Still unlabeled, welcome in, man. Sending death threats to all of them, and he may not even be able to become a Supreme Court justice, something that he's been working for his entire life. And you would expect him to be walking on, frolicking through the fields after this? No, of course. The man feels so disrespected. He is personally being attacked because of these accusations. And take it from his side. If these accusations are 100% untrue, if they are unequivocally false, in which he has stated, then wouldn't you not be upset about it? I don't know why we can't get Graham out of office. I don't know. We suck. Taking it from his point of view, if he honestly doesn't recall that situation, if he was never in that situation, you would be outraged all on your own, right? You would want to go in there guns ablaze, metaphorically or physically, right? If you went through and you were being attacked in this manner, it takes a strong person to be able to just sit down and have angry words when something like that happens. And I know a lot of Democrats right now are trying to expand upon this and saying he doesn't have the temperament. He doesn't care. No, what that means is that you lack empathy. You lack the ability to see when somebody is being destroyed. If it was Brett Kavanaugh, let's say Brett Kavanaugh was absolutely 100% guilty of this. Okay? Let's say he was absolutely guilty of this. Does that mean that you go after his wife? Does that mean you go after his children? Does that mean you go after his friends? Does that mean you go after other people? No, of course not. So the idea, the mere idea, the fact that people have inklings of ideas that this is somehow acceptable and that when that happens that people should be somehow happy about it, it just shows you the lack of thought process that so many people are willing to share. How do you know he's being destroyed? Because you can open up your eyes and see this. Evidence is to be expected, especially by a federal judge. Yes, and there's no evidence that's been provided thus far. It's amazing. But this is all being forgotten about. And so we go through, and the Republicans and the Democrats listen to Brett Kavanaugh's testimony. His was heartfelt. His was fired up. His was extremely emotional. He pointed out a lot of consistencies. He pointed out his entire calendar to show that entire month he was not available to even be at these parties. He pointed out the fact that no one is able to recall any of these situations. He had a litany of justifications behind this. And people would rather scoff at this rather than say, look, this is a man that's actually well organized. Maybe for once we should actually trust that somebody could be innocent. But of course, what this entire country has come down to is that we don't care about the presumption of innocence. We care about the presumption of our bias. That's what we care about. That's what each and every one of us cares about. It is so difficult for people, once they have created their own bias, to say this person is innocent despite my original bias, or this person is guilty despite my bias. That's a farce. By common law, one testimony is not enough in order to provide if you will, right? There has to be evidence. There has to be other forms of evidence, right? It used to be that you would have to have two witnesses for it. Now you have to have basically a corroborating witness or evidence that shows without a shadow of a doubt. Have you ever blacked out, Jason? I don't believe I've ever blacked out. But that's what you're doing for Kavanaugh. You're professing his innocence. I am not professing his innocence. I am professing that if you put yourself in his shoes and if he was innocent, I have put both presumptions there. I've put as he's innocent, as he's guilty, and I've explained them both. I am on the grounds that both of them were being honest. I think that both of them were being honest. I don't think that I have a gut feeling. My bias is that Ford may be having somebody that she may be pointing at Brett Kavanaugh, and that might not be it. I don't think that this was intentional. I don't think that this was malice in any way. I think that this is an honest mistake, and it's an issue. I hope the best for both of them. And it's that I'm trying to bring out of the party side. I'm trying to bring out keep away from the partisanship. I'm trying to keep away from everything. I'm trying to be as objective as possible by providing this. How in the world could you think or know if either of them are truthful? I'm not saying that they both are. I'm saying I feel like they are. Because looking at their rhetoric, looking at their testimony, looking at the way that things are going, right? I suffer from PTSD. I know what PTSD entails. I know what that feeling goes through. I know how traumatic some situations are and how you can remember some things and you don't remember all things. Yes, I believe that Ford is honest when she's saying that she was sexually assaulted, if you will. I believe that she was sexually assaulted. I don't know if I believe the allegation that it was Brett Kavanaugh, because I think that they both provided a strong testimony. What about the two men who gave affidavits? Yeah, so there were two men that said, yes, I actually have performed sexual activity against against Dr. Ford. It's past the statute of limitations. There's nothing that they can do about it criminally. These have both been thwarted by members of Congress. It's kind of weird. It's interesting. Jordan Peterson is a fantastic guy, and it's so that one that was kind of a weird fact that came out, and it's interesting to see if that's going to gain any traction. Not Maryland, no limitations. Oh, really? Okay. Well, that's interesting then. So that whole entire debacle is of course, we'll have to wait and see if anything comes from that. But so we finished off the hearing, and basically both sides said, look, I'm going to vote, I'm not going to vote. And it was basically right down the partisan lines. Now, what we got to today was, of course, the vote, and it was 11-10. Jeff Flake, Murkowski, and I believe one other one, Susan Collins, all said that they wouldn't vote yes unless we had a week's investigation. Since then, President Trump has actually said the FBI is going to do up to 1 week investigation on this on a narrow scope. Now, here's where things get interesting. Dr. Ford's lawyer said that's unacceptable. You have to expand. You have to you have to make the scope unlimited, and it has to be able to provide as many days as they need. That's true. If you put up Amy Barrett, we would have been fine. And that's there's really did the investigation already started? It may have already, like the order is already out, so it's just a matter of getting it collected and getting it started. Hold on. So with that investigation, why does it have to be limited? Well, because a lot of the people that were advocating for this, they pointed to the Anita Hill situation. They said, look, Anita Hill got an FBI investigation. Why can't Dr. Ford? Anita Hill had a 3-day investigation before it was closed. No evidence found. Clarence Thomas still sits on the bench today. So we've provided double. The idea there is that they provided double the time, and they're going to keep the scope narrow. Why do they want to keep the scope narrow? Because if you just say, look, here's the scope, and the scope is whatever it is, right? We're having another special counsel issue in which somebody is investigating an unlimited scope. Now, you're not just going after Brett Kavanaugh, you're going after other people. Maybe one of his friends didn't pay taxes, and now that friend is going to be going to jail. And now they're going to find out that Brett Kavanaugh has ties to the Russian government, and you know, that whole entire conspiracy theory gets brought up again. We'll just have a second cycle of this special counsel. So instead, right, you keep the scope. Hey, these are the allegations. Dr. Ford says that he was here during the summer of 82. This is where the party happened. These are the people. Go ahead, find out what you need to find. If you can find anything, if you can prove it without a shadow of a doubt, then that's the way we're going to go. I think that this is really the closest to a bipartisan answer. I think this will satisfy both sides, except for the side that doesn't want Kavanaugh, those who are guilty of their conscious bias or unconscious bias, or it really is just conscious bias at this point. They're going to be upset no matter what happened. With additional claim as port industry lawyer. Yeah, no, Avenatti is becoming a joke. Is it normal for sexual abuse victims to hire a lawyer who also represents the porn industry? It might be. And so it's this entire situation